Welcome to another episode of what we do best, talking about social, political, philosophical issue. Today we are going to talk about a very important topic, and is about Nigerians as a whole and why we are hated all over the world. Okay, for emphasis, I'm going to talk about Nigerians who live in the other African countries and the kind of reception we get from the local population in these countries that we live in. How do they accept us? How do they perceive us? What is it that they see when they see a Nigerian or when they encounter a Nigerian? What is their expectation and everything? Okay, I think I can say that I'm experienced in this. This topic is something that forms part of my own life experiences because I've lived. I'm Nigerian, obviously. I was born in Nigeria. I was raised in Nigeria, and I've also lived in South Africa. Um, I've also had encounters with while I was living in South Africa. That was in the past. I also had encounters with people of other African countries. Like South Africa is like the African United States. It's like a melting pot of very diverse people, diverse culture, diverse tradition, and everything. Like if you go to South Africa, I don't think there's any African nationality that you wouldn't find in South Africa. So you get the chance to perceive, or you get the chance to deal with, as a Nigerian, to deal with people from other African countries and to also get their perception of what they think of Nigerians. And then I can tell you that it's mostly negative. If you've had the opportunity to deal with people of other African countries or probably had a conversation with them, and immediately they realize that you're Nigerian, something snaps in them. And then they deal with you with they deal with you. It's just a lot of contempt, there's a lot of suspicions, there's a lot of mistrust. So today we are going to talk about why this is the case. Whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the Nigerians? Is it the prejudice and bias of these other African people? So today's topic, the context is going to be South Africa because I live there. I used to live there. And I lived there for quite some time. So I know the people. I also mingled with people from other African countries who happen to live in South Africa, but during the time that I was also living there. So I'm talking people like mostly like Zimbabweans. I also worked with them, some of them. I'm talking people like Mozambicans, Namibians, Cameroonians, Ghanaians, Botswanians, Lesotho people, people from Swaziland, people from Egypt, people from all over West Africa. Those would be the Liberians, the Togolese, the Beninois people, and just more or less even people from the eastern part of Africa. So the my engagement with them or my interactions with them always has this contempt element to it. No matter how you try to get them to accept you, once they get the feeling, or once they find out that you are Nigerian, they kind of put an extra layer of protection between you and them. So we're going to talk about all of that. So first and foremost, is this right? Of course, I don't think any kind of prejudice or bias is right. But it doesn't just end there. So we also need to understand, why are these people prejudiced towards Nigerians? Why do they hate Nigerians? Let me just use that word. Because I've seen some of them who have this very, 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 very strong hatred for Nigerians. Whose fault is it? Is it the fault of the Nigerians? Is there something that we are not doing well? Is it the fault of these people who hate us? Whether we like it or not, I think Nigeria in Africa is a big factor. With a population of 200 million people, I believe that one out of every four black people is Nigerian. That's huge. That's a quarter of the black population is Nigerian. That's very, very huge. That's very significant. So I don't think you can talk about Africa without talking about Nigeria by default because of the population. And by virtue of this very huge population, we tend to find ourselves everywhere. If you walk into a place, or if you go into a country, you find yourself in a new country, and then you don't find Nigerians in that country. Something must be wrong with that place. Something must be very wrong with that place. We are everywhere. Even in war ravaged countries of the world, you'd be surprised. You'd find, I met Somalian once in Johannesburg in those days when I was still living there. He told me that in his country there are Nigerian businessmen, you know. So I was like, Somalia. So what the hell would a Nigerian be doing in Somalia? He said to me, no, they're doing business and they're doing very well for themselves. They are into all sorts of, whatever, just to make ends meet. So that actually told me a lot. If you are able to find a Nigerian in Somalia, then it would mean that we are indeed everywhere. So our agro with our African brothers and sisters, I think it's multifaceted. It is not as simple as saying that they hate you, they don't like you because of your success, they don't like you because of your country or where you're coming from. I don't think it's just that. I think it's a very, very complicated thing. So today we are going to talk about it all. I will try to give you my, perception or my take on the issue. You remember, nobody knows it all. This is just my opinion. Whatever I'm going to share today with you is basically my opinion. It doesn't mean that it's incontrovertible, that it cannot be challenged. It's just my opinion. Then, you probably learn a few things from what I have to say today. So let me put it this way. As of the last count, we have something like 30 to 40 million Nigerians in the diaspora. Yeah. We have 30 to 40 million Nigerians, people of Nigerian origin, who live abroad, who live in other countries that are not Nigeria. That's very huge. I mean, that's actually, that number can actually make up a country. Some countries' populations are actually, 100 times less than that. So you can imagine 40 million people. I mean, what is the population of Ghana? What is the population of countries like Liberia, like countries like Benin Republic, countries like South Africa is 57 million. You can now compare that. Whereas we have 40 million people of Nigerian origin who live in different parts of the world apart from Nigeria. So what this would mean is that in Africa, you'd find us everywhere. It's just inevitable. All over Africa, we're there. So when you go to countries like, so my experience is mostly from the perspective of Nigerians who live in Southern Africa. Because if you lived in South Africa, um, Nigerians who live in Zambia, Mozambique, all those places, we share a lot. We shared a lot in common. You can say that they also share a lot in common because in Southern Africa, um, sociologically, there are more or less the same kind of people. The mentality is not, it's diverse, but basically, for the most part, they behave alike, they think alike, of course, with exceptions. So in South Africa, a typical South African, remember, when I say typical, I don't mean every South African, just to avoid being tagged a generalizer. Like I'm generalizing a lot. But I lived in that place for some time, so I understand the temperament and the feelings towards Nigerian. Your typical South African guy, especially the guys, don't like a foreigner. That's just how it is. For various reasons, when the ANC took over, or before they took over in 94, before Mandela came to power, there was a lot of promises made to these guys. They were promised heaven and earth. They were promised that Mandela is the Messiah, is going to bring heaven to them, every problem will be solved. The typical political rhetoric. So a lot of that didn't happen. Anyone with any sense knows that rhetorics don't always translate to practical stuff. Sometimes, or most of the time, things don't really work out based on the way politicians would talk about them. So there's always a fall guy. So at the end of apartheid '94, South Africa had like an open border policy on immigration. So they were like, remember, these guys were in exile all over Africa. So they spent the ANC guys who fought for freedom spent most of their times abroad. The top guys who took over, and they were all over Africa. They got help from African government. They got scholarships from African government. They got funds. The ANC was being sponsored by African governments. The ANC in exile. That was before Mandela became president in '94. So when apartheid ended, so the ANC had an open door immigration policy, like anyone could come in. Professionals, they needed skilled people from all over Africa to come help them build up their new country. So, you know what happens? There's an adage in Igbo land that says, "Ofu aka rụta mma n'ozu ụwa ọnụ." I don't know how to literally translate it, but it simply means when you open your door, when you have an open door immigration policy, what it means is that the qualified people who are your main target are going to come into the country, and then criminal elements are also going to take advantage of the open door policy and walk right into your territory. It's inevitable. If you don't put the right immigration measures at the borders, at the airport, if you don't organize things such a way, like streamline it in such a way that you receive out the chaff from the quality, then it means that it's an all-commerce party. Just about anyone can just walk into your country. So that's basically what happened. So while people like Professor Motoshaw, these are like the academics, doctors and the engineers, were leaving Nigeria, immigrating to this new place to help them build up their country, a lot of criminal elements were also doing the same from Nigeria. A lot of very hardened criminals or former criminals started immigrating to South Africa. From about the mid 90s, it became an in thing. I remember when I was growing up, South Africa was a destination for like all sorts of very bad people were going to South Africa when I was growing up in Enugu. Like these are like guys that we knew in the neighborhood, that they were like troublemakers and criminals. They were all, everyone was going to South Africa. So these guys are just, and the South Africans themselves were just coming out of this apartheid thing, whereby they were subjugated by the minority white population. So the economy was opening up for them, the opportunities was beginning to open up for them. All of a sudden, they have competition from all over Africa. Like the influx of these African migrants became competition for them, inevitably. So while they were still trying to integrate and at least they were trying to begin to reap and the fruits of freedom by after they have ousted the white minority leaders and rulers. They had competition from all over Africa, so there was an influx. So from day one, this thing of hatred started. I mean, what do you call it? It was being cultivated around this time that I'm talking about. The resentment, the anger, the competition started being cultivated around this time that I'm talking about. So initially it was fine, and then it started building up. Politically, the ANC government didn't do all they promised the people. They didn't bring utopia. They didn't give them the jobs, the economic opportunities were, here and there. It wasn't abundant. It wasn't really enough. So, in every situation, there's always bound to be a scapegoat. Someone must take the blame for everything. So the foreigner generally began to take the blame, the agro started around the mid 90s, and the crime rate in South Africa was also, off the hook. There was a lot of guns on the street by virtue of apartheid. The ANC guys were also, they were also fighting. It became bloody at some point, their struggle. So there was a lot of guns on the street. So when apartheid ended, the black guys who were restricted to the homelands, who couldn't go to the white majority cities, now had the opportunity to go to all these fancy places and live there because apartheid have ended. So these new foreign nationals from all over Africa who were coming were also targeting, or most of them were dwelling in those major cities, and those would be like your Johannesburg, which is more or less the economic capital of South Africa. So Nigerians also came in. So crime was very rife. Nigerians didn't come with crime. In every society, there are criminals. So even if when you're a foreigner, when you get to the place, even if you want to take to a life of crime, you are bound to meet some criminal elements who are locals, because you can't come from wherever you're coming and start doing your thing. You need people who are already on the ground that you're going to collaborate with. So that's what happened. So it's not like Nigerians came with crime. South Africa was already infested with crime before the Nigerians came. But you know how it is. Zimbabweans were also coming in. Malawians were also coming in. And all the countries in Africa, and especially the neighboring countries of South Africa, were not really economically viable. They were all struggling. So South Africa became like a little United States to the rest of Africa. So everyone wanted to go there because the infrastructure was like European, North American standard. You know, the economy wasn't too bad. There were jobs, at least relatively compared to an African context, and compared to what we are used to in Africa. They had a few things. They were better than most African countries. So it was like a getaway place. So everyone went there. So the resentment by this time was already growing. And then, when if you're a guy, most migrant population usually it's men. Like if you have um, a huge diaspora population in any country, usually it's the guys who go to live there, and then they would marry local women. Then our guys, Nigerian guys, started marrying local women. And then you know what it means in life. If you've got money, or between two guys, if two guys are going to have a quarrel or are going to have a fight, if money is not involved, a woman is involved. So that you marrying their sister was also another problem, you know. So the hatred started to build up gradually but surely. So it's sociological, it's economical, it's political. So Nigerians are very loud people, especially the Igbos. Loud, not in the sense of verbally, in the sense of showing off success, in the sense of being assertive, in the sense of being very confident, sometimes to the point of being overconfident. There's a thin line between being rude and being confident. I think our Nigerian people, we don't recognize this boundary. Being confident is very good, but you also need to watch it, because this thin line that exists, that is drawn or that dissects or divides confidence and being rude, sometimes it becomes invincible to us. We cross it and we don't even realize that we've crossed it. So in Nigeria and Igbo land, like most South Africans or most Nigerians in South Africa are like, in these other African countries are mostly Igbos. Let's just put it that way. So we don't recognize when to keep quiet or when to keep it down. We tend to rub it in people's faces that we have arrived, we've made it, we've made money. And this breeds resentment. It's you could call it a cultural thing on our part. I mean, if you do it in Igbo land, nobody cares. It's in fact a good thing, because now you're going to give the other ones who haven't made it financially reason to go out there and make it. So it's our culture, but I think we don't recognize the fact that when you get to another man's country, they see things differently. They think in a different way. They have a different culture. Probably not as egalitarian as you guys are wherever you're coming from. So that clash of culture creates problems. I'm trying to get to the point why these people from all these African countries don't like us much when we're in their country. So there's this resentment, and everybody doesn't like you because you're successful. It's always like that. If you have a circle of friends, say you are 10 of you, and then 5 years down the line, two or three become millionaires. The other seven are going to resent those three. Not always, but Very likely. They're going to resent them. Whatever you say or whatever you do will be misconstrued. You know, people that you used to chill with who begin to look at you like you're becoming arrogant. Probably you are not arrogant, just because they think having money makes people arrogant, or because now you're better than us, automatically in their mind they think you've become arrogant. Probably you are not arrogant, but this belief that we must all be the same, we mustn't grow past each other, we must dwell the same little point, we must dwell on the same little point, no one must try to move up the ladder. That kind of mentality. So when you eventually try to move up the ladder, or you practically do that, they resent you. In that resenting you, then they will now say that you are arrogant, whereas you didn't do anything different, you just made it, or you just had a financial leap. So I'm trying to give it context. So you find a Nigerian came through, probably from wherever in Nigeria. After a few years, he's driving a BMW, he's living in a nice place, in a nice place in town, places where even the locals wouldn't even dare. And then it doesn't end there. You run around the town, intimidating the local guys, doing things that would, you don't keep it low key. You rub it on their faces that they are lazy, that you are better than them, even from the way you talk to them, when you approach them. You do everything, probably sometimes involuntarily, but it hurts these local people. you know you get into fight with them, because of women, because you're chasing after one woman, and then because you have the financial muscle, you tend to control things, or you tend to like subdue them. So what do? They keep a record. The resentment is growing. They keep a record of all those things, and then through word of mouth, your reputation, they will ruin it, because they will speak to their fellow countrymen about you. And then the story will be that Nigerians are like this. Man is biased, man is prejudiced, man tends to generalize a lot, you know. So instead of talking about the certain Chukwuemeka who did him bad, he's going to talk about it as if the whole of Nigeria, or everyone who was born in Nigeria, or everyone who's from Nigeria did him bad. So the story goes on. It continues to spread. The resentment also spreads with it. So over time, you become a persona non grata. Your entire population becomes resented. I'm just explaining the sociological part of it. There's another part of it. It's unfortunate to say this. Most diaspora Nigerians, not all of them, a good number of them, let me just put it that way, a good number of them are criminal elements with criminal intent. So they get into all these countries, and then they do legitimate business. Some of them are lecturers, some of them are teaching in universities, but a good number of them are also into crime. They do all sorts of things to make a living. Some of them are drug dealers, some of them are street hustlers, some of them are into fraud. Those kind of people. So when you are doing crime, you're going to have a lot of encounter with police. It's just inevitable. And then when you have these encounters with the police, it's going to make headline news. The newspapers, the TV, through word of mouth, people are going to know about it. So despite the fact that you all from that country, Nigeria, are not criminals, but you know what happens? Bad news is good news. Or you can put it this way, bad news spreads or goes viral more than good news for the most part. So if you hear that a Nigerian killed someone, or that a Nigerian who's a university student made first class, probably both of them will trend, but the bad news, like the guy that killed someone, is going to go viral compared to the guy who made it in school. So it's just inevitable. So in South Africa, there's a lot of criminal elements of Nigerian origin. Mind you, there are like Chinese guys who are also thieves, Pakistani guys who are also thieves, South Africans who are also, in fact, majority of the criminals in South Africa is South Africans because it's their country. You find Ghanaians, Liberians, Cameroonians who are criminals in South Africa. But for some reason, these guys, their stories don't make it or it doesn't get enough airtime when you compare the same kind of stories or when you compare the same kind of crime when a Nigeria commits it. Then you find out because we are loud. Nigerians are very loud. So whatever they do tends to get blown out of proportion. So over time, it becomes a tradition. People want to talk about Nigerians because they expect Nigerians to do bad. They expect Nigerians to become criminals wherever they are. So when you put all these things that I've explained, when you put it all together, then you now get the foundation of the aggro. You now get the foundation of the reason why they don't like us in Africa. In Kenya, the resentment towards Nigerians is huge. In South Africa, it's huge. In Zambia, in Zimbabwe, wherever you go, or in Mozambique, wherever we have a huge Nigerian diaspora population in Africa, the resentment is very, very rife. And it's because of some of these things that I've talked about now. They don't want to see us. They don't want to see us. And then all these things, when we talk about people from all these countries who don't like us, we tend to exonerate ourselves such that we're saying that they are the bad people and we are not. Let me tell you something. At home in Nigeria, the culture that fuels this hatred that we experience outside hails from home. The get rich quick syndrome, the intent and the insistence on becoming financially viable through any means necessary. It has become a tradition in Nigeria, especially in my part of Nigeria, which is Igbo land. People are leaving school, getting their degrees. People are leaving their parents' households and abodes. When an adult, when a man grows up, when it's time for you to go and start fending for yourself financially, and you have so much zeal, and you come from a culture that wants to celebrate excellence, a culture that wants, like a culture with a go-getter mentality. When you head out there in the street, or when you head out there in the big cities in Nigeria, and then see that the opportunities are not really there, but the manpower is there, the urge to make it is boiling inside you, but there is no opportunity. You cannot translate this yearning, you cannot translate this push to make it with anything tangible, or you cannot translate it to anything tangible because the opportunities to do that are not there. What do? Probably you can't afford to get yourself to America or to Europe because it's expensive. You start heading to these other African countries where it is easy for you or easier for you to get to. And then when you get there, you're still that person who wants to make it. You're still that person who doesn't want to do those jobs that probably will pay you $200 a month. You're still that person who wants to make it and go home and show to the people at home that you've made it finally. Because the culture at home says you have to make it, otherwise you're screwed. The culture at home says you need to become someone financially. You need to become someone economically, otherwise you're nobody. So when you get to these new countries, you start doing all sorts of things to survive. Anything is fair game once it fetches you money. And once you get involved in those things that you consider fair game, which are mostly crime related, you start encountering the law, you start encountering the local population. And because of the fact that what you're doing is wrong, it's criminal, the local population will begin to hate you. It's inevitable. They begin to hate you. And for the fact that you're coming from a different country and then you're coming to our country and you're doing all these things and you're making it in our presence and we're looking at you, that's actually a very, very, very fine ground for cultivating the seed of resentment. You get? That's the beginning of that resentment. That's where it starts. So this is why they don't like us. Everything I've said now, put it all together, is the reason why they don't like us. So the solution is we need to try to keep most of us at home. Crime is not going to end. Crime is a universal phenomenon. There wouldn't be a time, or there have never been a time in the history of mankind that you didn't have criminals. It's inevitable. But what you try to do is to ameliorate, to reduce the instances of crime happening. For us to stop this issue of Nigerians being hated in these other African countries, it needs to start from home. We need to find a way to keep most of our youth at home. And how do you do that? Providing opportunities, creating jobs for because most people who leave Nigeria would have stayed back home if they managed to secure some kind of employment, some kind of an economic activity the moment they leave school. If you find something doing, let's say you graduated from university today, and in 2-3 weeks' time, you get something doing that at least pays your rent, feeds you, and keeps you going. The tendency for you to go out or the yearning for you to go outside of Nigeria will reduce. So we can scream ourselves hooks and talk about how we are treated in all over Africa, but we need to start staying home. It's either you're going to stay home or you go out there and then you continue to complain. Because I've just told you things that would happen when you get out there. Because you're going to need money, not the kind of money that you get from being employed or from doing menial jobs. Because because of our culture, when you leave Nigeria, you're expected to come back big. And big doesn't happen in a vacuum. You get big doesn't happen in a vacuum. Big happens through doing big things and recouping or getting or leveraging on general life stuff to make ends meet economically. And what can you leverage on? It's either you're doing legitimate work, and legitimate work doesn't pay you big immediately. It takes time. You need to build, you need to cultivate, you need to pay with blood and sweat. And you don't want that because you really want to go home and show the people at home that you've made it, right? That's our mentality, eh? So what do? You take to crime. And then you expect to be a criminal in another man's land, and then you expect the people of this land or people who own the land to love you. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So we have a problem. It's like a war without end. We have a problem. The solution is far-fetched. Every day, our youths are graduating from universities in Nigeria. In my own family, they are uncountable. People with degrees. And an educated guy who doesn't get an opportunity to use his education in a positive way, if he or she turns to crime, oh my goodness, all hell will be let loose. And these are the guys who are important all over Africa. So when we get to these new countries, we do our things, we get into trouble, they'll resent us. So you're talking about why do they hate us all over Africa? It's because of the things that I've just told you. If you want to ask that question, you also need to know the answer. It's from home. It's from home. The culture at home, the way of thinking, the economic degradation and deprivation, in a country where nothing works. It breeds an army of criminals. And when you spread these criminals everywhere, all hell is let loose. So we need to fix our country. We need to fix our home if we want to reduce this issue of hatred. Because you don't expect the guy in whose country that you live in, that you're committing crime in, to just let you walk over them or to just have nothing to say about it. We can say to them, okay, guys, please cut us some slack. We are all black people. But then it doesn't end there. You can say that to your host or citizens of your host country, but what are you doing to actually stop what they're accusing you of? Because you can say whatever you want to say, and then tomorrow you go and do another crime. What do you expect the response to be? For them to hug you and kiss you and say, "Oh my son, you are welcome. You did well." No, it's not going to happen. So here essentially from home, lack of economic opportunities. So we need to have a rethink. We need to really, really think about it. Why are we hated wherever we are? or wherever we go, because of the things that I've mentioned. And then until we remedy our own particular situations from home, I'm afraid it will continue forever. And no one will be able to stop it. So at least if we do not know all the solutions, we need to understand the problem. That's why when you go to Kenya, they don't want us. When you go to Zimbabwe, they don't want us. When you go to South Africa, they don't want us. I left South Africa. Part of the reason why I left South Africa is because of things that I've explained to you now. Because it doesn't matter if you are doing crime or not. If the majority of the Nigerian population in a particular vicinity are doing crime, you get involved one way or another through profiling, wrong profiling, and everything. So we used to complain in those days, but I'm not a criminal. What is your problem? They will tell you that all your brothers are criminals. And you know that most people around you are criminals. It's wrong for them to profile you like that. It's wrong for them to generalize. But hey, bro, we live in a real world. This is what we call reality. Profiling will never go away. Prejudice and bias will never go away. So why you are complaining to them, or why you are prevailing over them to at least stop profiling and generalizing and being prejudiced and biased towards you? We also need to talk about ourselves. What is fueling this? This get rich quick syndrome. Lack of economic opportunities. Then when we get out there, nobody wants to like us. Nobody wants to see us. Nobody wants to love us. We are always a very topical people. If you go to Kenya and mention Nigeria, wow. If you go to South Africa and mention Nigeria, wow. Negative, 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 negative. So we need to have everything, guys. And look at those things that we're doing that is killing our reputation out there, and try to remedy them. And I think to fix this problem, we need to go back home. It stems from our culture and our life outlook, our perception of life in Nigeria, especially in Igbo land. That's where it comes from. Thank you very much for listening.